If you like this video, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos. Travis Walton alien abduction case. November 5, 1975, Travis Walton was abducted by aliens while on his way home from logging in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona. He and his 6 co-workers witnessed a bright light in the woods while driving home in Mike Rogers's truck and decided to drive towards it to see what it was. When they approached the light, about 30 yards away, they stopped the truck because they realized it was some kind of a UFO that was about 20 feet in diameter and 8 feet high. At this time, Travis Walton jumped out of the truck and walked towards the floating object. Everyone else in the truck was yelling at him to come back when, what they described as a bluish light, came out of the flying saucer and directly hit Mr. Walton. Mr. Walton got slightly lifted off the ground and thrown back a few feet. At this point, Mike Rogers and the rest of the crew took off in fear. In what the crew figured was about 15 to 20 minutes, they decided to return to where they left Travis, but both the UFO and Travis were gone. They searched for him for about half an hour, hoping that he had tried to get away, but was nowhere to be found. They got back into town around 7:30 p.m. and Kenneth Peterson called the local deputy sheriff Chuck Ellison to report what had happened and that Travis Walton was missing. The deputy was obviously skeptical of their account of what happened earlier, even though all of the men were very distraught. In fact, later on, he was quoted saying, "If they were acting, they were awfully good at it." At this time the deputy called Sheriff Marlon Gillespie, who came down to interview the men with Officer Ken Copeland. They decided to get a search team together to look for Walton back at the scene, but there was no trace of him or the disc-shaped object that the men said had struck Travis. The police were beginning to suspect foul play. The witnesses' polygraph tests because Mr. Walton was missing and the story the men gave of a UFO abducting him, the police decided to administer a polygraph test to the 6 men. The test was taken by the men on November 10 by Cy Gilson. During the polygraph, the men were asked questions such as, if they had caused harm to Walton, if they were telling the truth about the UFO, if they knew where his body was buried. All of the men answered truthfully to the questions except Alan Dallas, whose test came back inconclusive. In Gilson's official report, he stated, "These polygraph examinations prove that these 5 men did see some object they believed to be a UFO and that Travis Walton was not injured or murdered by any of these men on that Wednesday." Travis Walton is found late in the evening on November 10. Grant Neff got a phone call from someone that claimed to be Travis Walton. The low raspy voice on the line said, "This is Travis. I'm at a phone booth at the Heber gas station, and I need help. Come and get me." Because of the attention the story had gotten the last 5 days, he thought it was a prank and almost hung up, but the man on the phone expressed again that he was Travis and he needed help. Grant and Dwayne drove out to the gas station and found Travis on the floor of the phone booth he made the call from. He was in the same clothes as he was when he went missing, was unshaven, and visibly thinner than before. He was dismayed, talking gibberish about strange beings, and was scared. They took him to his mother's house and tried to feed him and washed him off, but he was in pretty bad condition and had a hard time doing anything. Travis Walton's abduction story. It took a while for Travis to tell his tale as he was pretty discombobulated, humiliated, and just all around shook up by the events that took place, as you can imagine. When he did though, it was an amazing story. The first thing he remembered after being struck by the bluish light in the woods was waking up and thinking he may be in a hospital as he was laid out on a table with a bright light above him. He said that it was muggy and warm as he first opened his eyes and looked around in pain. He saw 3 figures standing around him which he at first thought were doctors, but were wearing orange garments. It was then when his vision cleared that he realized they were not human. He described the beings as being less than 5 feet tall, having large dark eyes, large heads, and small facial features such as small nostrils and ears. This account is comparable to other alien abduction and similar to what people may call the Greys. Frightened, Travis then jumped up off the table and attacked one of the creatures by striking it with the back of his fist. He mentioned that it wasn't as solid as a human would be and was lighter and was thrown back more easily. At this time, the three aliens tried to subdue him, so he grabbed the nearest object to him to try and fend him off. He managed to find a thin, 1.5-foot long glass-like cylinder on the table next to where he woke up and tried to break off the top to use as a sharp weapon, but couldn't manage to break it. He started to yell at him, "Keep back." The whole time they never tried to communicate with him, or from what he could tell, each other. He was ready to fight him off at this point, so the three aliens fled the room. After they left, he decided this was a good time to try to find a way to escape. He left the first room and headed down a hallway which led to a large spherical room with a chair in the center. Thinking there may be one of the creatures in the chair, he approached it carefully, while noticing lights appearing all around him as he did so. These lights seemed to be stars from the walls around him becoming transparent. After he realized the coast was clear, he sat in the chair and pushed a small lever next to the chair, hoping desperately it might open a door for him to escape. At this time, the stars around him started to shift and rotate slowly as if he may be controlling the ship. He then got out of the chair and walked towards an entrance to look for another possible way out when he heard a noise and turned. To his surprise, it was not one of the aliens, but a tall human wearing a blue suit, a thick belt, and some kind of helmet with a glass face. He frantically asked him hundreds of questions all at once, but the man simply grabbed his arm and motioned for him to follow him, and he did. They traveled down a corridor and the man leads him into a large room that was shaped like a quarter of a sideways cylinder. In the room, which Mr. Walton described like a hangar, was about 3 shiny 40-foot saucer-shaped ships. From there the man continued to lead him down 2 other hallways and into a room that contained 3 other humans wearing the same blue suits. He proceeded to ask these humans what was going on and if they could help him, but they did not respond. Instead, they led him to a table and covered his face with something that looked similar to an oxygen mask. After that, he awoke by the gas station in Heber, Arizona, and saw a disc-shaped object fly away. About the witnesses, there were 6 people that witnessed Travis Walton's abduction on that November night, all co-workers of his, and Mike Rogers, the owner of the company and future brother-in-law. Michael Rogers, John Goulet, Alan Dallas, Steve Pierce, Kenneth Peterson, Dwayne Smith. Audio files including exclusive Travis Walton interview. Travis Walton's first interview on the 11th of November 1975. Walton's first interview on Face the State since being abducted and taken aboard an alien spacecraft. In the interview, Mr. Walton describes the aliens as being like men, but not quite human. He said they had underdeveloped features, were hairless, were slightly shorter than himself, and were dressed in a kind of brownish-orange one-piece garment. He said that after packing up from work and heading home he saw what he thought was sunset and was going to comment on it. That's when they all saw a UFO hovering off the side of the road about 30 yards away and stopped the truck. He got out of the truck and started walking towards the object. This is when, as he says, he got stuck and was knocked back. I don't remember seeing any flash of light. When he regained consciousness, he was looking at a light coming from a ceiling while lying on a table. Travis Walton's interview on April 23, 1980 by Paige Bryant and Jack Kennicott. Mr. Walton talking with Paige Bryant and Jack Kennicott about his amazing experience being abducted in Arizona. He says that he could see stars like a planetarium, but didn't recognize any of the constellations. He says the first thing he saw when he awoke was aliens which he tried to talk to, but the aliens wouldn't communicate with him. He said, "If they were trying to communicate with me, I would have been a bad reception." NUFORC report the 11th of August 1975. A friend of Travis Walton's brother reporting the sighting and abduction to the National UFO Reporting Center while Mr. Walton was still missing. Jerry Phillips report about AZ Town Marshal conversation the 11th of August 1975. He said, 6 of them went into the woods. 5 of them came back. Travis Walton's brother Ralph Anderson, discusses his brother's disappearance the 11th of September 1975. His brother said that Travis had mentioned before that if he ever saw a flying saucer he would try and communicate with it. That's why he got out of the truck and raised his hands to it. One person said that they were very skeptical of flying saucers, but not so much anymore, and another said that he doesn't believe in them, but he saw one. Talking about the investigation the 11th of September 1975, there were slightly higher radiation readings on the Geiger counter, but nobody took any soil samples. The sheriff's department has found nobody in their search. Talking about the investigation, Walton is back the 11th of November 1975. First report of Travis Walton back from the abduction. He called his brother to pick him up and is, at this point, in the hospital. The polygraphs on the 6 men that witnessed his abduction have been completed and 5 out of 6 came back as truthful. About Travis Walton's return the 11th of November 1975, a phone call came in and the person said he was Mr. Walton. He pleaded that he needed help and was at the phone booth by the Amoco station. They found him passed out in the phone booth and brought him home. When he was weighed, he had lost 12 pounds. When asked what he saw, he stated that he knew he was in outer space because all he could see were stars. It was black and there didn't seem to be any sun or other lights other than stars in the blackness of space. Mr. Walton said that when he was brought up into space, the ship he was on docked with another ship and he could see other ships in the vicinity and they were all different shapes. Phone call from Travis' brother to Ralph Anderson November 13, 1975. Travis is in a Phoenix hospital under a fake name and is severely dehydrated. He said that the first thing he remembers when he woke was lying on the ground and seeing the UFO leaving. Friend of Travis Walton's brother talks about what's going on November 15, 1975. No polygraph taken yet by Travis Walton. More discussion about picking up Mr. Walton from the phone booth and skepticism about the whole event. Expert polygraph examiner Cleve Baxter lectures on. Baxter discusses using polygraphs in UFO sightings and interacting with the scientific community.